Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to go to a few examples I have, and especially since it's just you and me right now, I thought
Okay.
we could look at some of these questions that people are asking or things that they're saying and see why. And then we can also point to whatever issues we think are happening. So this person has said, always found life a bit tough in all aspects of my life: mental health, love life, absent father, toxic friendship. So let's pick that apart. She says, first of all aspects of my life. What does that mean? Or where would we be looking in the chart for that?
All aspects. I think we would be looking at the ascendant, because
That's pretty good. Or the moon, right? Because she's the
yeah,
co-ruler of
of
everything.
course.
Right? So
Yep.
ascendant, I'm thinking especially moon, especially because all aspects of my life, mental health.
Mental health. Yeah.
Moon
Love
also
life,
represents
absent
our
father.
mind,
Yeah.
right? So,
Toxic friendship.
okay, good. So then love life, of course, would be what?
Uh, love life would be Venus, or the seventh house.
Absolutely. And then absent father would be what?
Um, I think father would be the fourth house, or Saturn.
Fourth, it's a day chart, so it could be sun for this particular
Hmm.
chart.
Of
So, but
course.
fourth
Yeah.
house and sun, yes, and then part of the father too, if we were to look at that. And then friendships are where?
If it's close friendships, then third house, or allies are like 11th house.
Yeah, exactly. So third house or 11th, excellent. So you're right on the money. So what is advancing? So let's first of all see if anything is advancing. So
All right.
yeah, what's advancing? Hi, Anne-Louise.
I think except sun, everybody is.
Except for sun, everybody. Moon's not. Hey, Venus and
Hi.
Mars are, yeah.
I cannot see, is the moon in the fifth or is in the sixth? It's
Sixth
right on the
house. So it's
cusp.
right on the cusp of the sixth. So we've got, yeah,
Yeah.
so it looks like it's Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, but Mercury and the sun are in the ninth.
Yeah.
So I would say, even though Mercury kind of
Mercury.
belongs
Yeah.
to the 10th, he's at 6, it's 8 degrees. So we can go ahead and give it to him. So are any of those planets rulers of the houses we just talked about? Who rules the fourth? There's Jupiter. And
Jupiter.
look, Jupiter is in detriment and retrograde. So there's
Yay.
there's an absent father, okay? So then
Yep.
what were we looking at? The toxic friendships. Venus is the ruler of that. Venus is with Mars. So look, Venus oh wait, no, Venus isn't. Look, Venus is in Libra.
Yep.
Is she? Hold on.
In Gemini.
Gemini, rather. Venus is in Gemini. Mars is in Cancer. So is Venus experiencing anything weird? Not really. Okay, so why would that be a problem necessarily? The 11th house. So that's still something to think about. But at the same time, the 11th house is what's the word? Advancing, right? So that's also an issue. And then the other thing was, and then love life, of course, which is Venus, and she's also ruler of the 7th house. So there is something going on with this Venus. Right, so there is something going on with this Venus. It's just to kind of figure out what that might be. Okay, so all aspects of my life and mental health makes sense when we see the moon is in the 6th house, right?
It does.
The ruler
Even though it's an exaltation, but yeah, it's an exaltation, but there's something happening with the Venus. That's why this moon is not able to, show.
Or there's this Mars who's in its fall, the ruler of the ascendant. And so is there something going on between the moon and Mars? Yes, there is an applying sextile. There's an applying sextile between the moon and Mars. So, but none of that is helpful to Mars, right? So none of that is helpful to Mars. And the moon being exalted is bringing the 6th house to Mars, right?
Exactly.
Right. So that's the pushing. So that's the pushing management. So remember, when we're talking about all these different types of pushing management is basically when the applying planet pushes its responsibilities as per its house rulership. Or house rulership or house occupation. In this case, the moon is the exaltation ruler of the 6th house. And Mars is in the moon's own sign. So this is a very receptive sextile where the Mars can get even more of what it really doesn't like, right? The Mars can get more of this kind of emotionalism that it would rather act, but the emotionalism gets in the way, right? The emotionalism and the neediness. So this is a very interesting chart in that respect. I thought we would look at that one. Here's the next one. Always found life a bit tough. Oh, wait, that's the same one? Always found, wait, no, there's a different one. Here, it's this one. No, it's the same one. Oh, shit, I'm just choosing the same one. Okay, so I'm at a point. That's this one. Okay. This was a long one. So I'm at a point where I'm trying to figure out why it is so hard for me to maintain genuine friendships. It seems like most of the time they have hidden extreme negative views of me that they have assumed. Backstabbing, you name it. What are they talking about?
They're talking about hidden enemies. That would be 12th house.
12th house, but they're talking about false friends, right? So they're talking about what should be a friend, but isn't a friend. Okay, so what is the ruler of the 12th house here?
It's Venus.
Okay, and who is the ruler of the 11th house?
Jupiter.
Okay, what sign is Jupiter in?
Cancer.
Jupiter?
Yeah, Jupiter. Sorry, Libra.
Yeah, there we go. So Jupiter is in the sign of the ruler of the 12th house. That's okay. That's one of the first things I noticed. Is there anything connected? So the ascendant is Gemini. Is there anything going on between the ruler of the 12th and the ruler of the first?
Ruler of the 12th is Venus and it's Mercury. So is this going on? Okay, Mercury and Venus. Where's Venus? Okay.
Not really, huh?
No, there's no second. It's too wide.
But did you notice this? That Aries is intercepted.
Intercepted, yes.
And here's Mercury with Mars. So this is what I told this person. I basically found a nice way to tell them that they were the problem. Because ultimately because remember, Moon and Mars are what? I mean, Moon and Mercury rather are what? They're the soul of the person. They're the character, they're who the person, they're how we identify the fullness, the ascendant, the moon, Mercury, that's how we identify the full human being in the chart, right? So when we see something going on with them, we know that's affecting on the personal level. Now, what does Mercury rule?
The head.
Well, in this particular case, yes, he does. But I'm thinking his own particular certification. Yes, the head, that's indicative too, but his own particular signification, which is in the head. So it's something that's in the head. What is he rule?
Communication, thoughts.
The tongue, that's right. So he rules the tongue and speech. So what I think is going on, and look at how all of this stuff is in the 6th house.
Yikes.
And Mars is in his joy in the 6th house.
Joy.
And usually I find that this is the crusader rabbit of the chart.
Yeah.
This, because Mars loves to fight against something. So what I thought is probably this person is unconsciously combative and that they are aggressive in speech. They might harp on particular causes that they're obsessed with, and that it turns people off and they're not really aware of it.
Yeah. Also, that Mars also has essential dignity, so it's a strong Mars, really strong Mars.
Right, exactly. That was my other feeling for it. So that it's very, so the passions are strong. The obsessive aspect of Scorpio is strong.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So there he is in his domicile, in his own, he's there in his joy. He's in his domicile and his joy. The ruler of the ascendant is there with him, visiting, hanging out. Right. So he's going to do his agenda. He's going to do Mars's agenda.
Exactly.
Right? And so
that's the only aspect that Mars is making. That's more interesting. It's not doing anything to any other planets, just the ruler of the ascendant. And that's really screwing things up for this person.
That's screwing things up for this person. So now what sign is Venus in?
It's in Virgo.
Who rules Virgo?
Mercury. Oh.
Right. What sign is the moon in?
Again, it's Taurus.
What sign is Venus in? Virgo. Bringing us back to, you see what I'm saying? So it brings us back to already. So even if we were to look at it from the soul indicators, the soul indicators would be Venus and Mars.
Mars, yeah.
Right? And Mars is already with the Mercury. You see? So that's how we know. What were you going to say?
Yeah, it's so close and it's such a tight aspect. It's just like minutes.
Right? So that's why and they can't see it, right? Because they themselves, because they're kind of the problem. That's the issue, in my opinion. That's the problem, is that ruler of the ascendant in the 6th house with the Mars makes it personally an issue, right? It's what's coming out of their mouth, right? Mars is coming.
Okay, I have a question here.
Yeah. Well, you want me to go back?
Suppose.
Do you want me to go back to the other chart?
Yeah, the same one we were talking about. The Mars one, the really strong Mars.
Hold on a second here. One more second. I'm at a point. Yeah, I'm at I'm at a point chart. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Go for it.
So my question is that the Mercury here is at 5 Scorpio 17 minutes and Mars is at 5 Scorpio 26 minutes. What if the situation was reversed? Like Mars was at 5:17 and Mercury was at 5:26 and it was a separating aspect, but it was still very close. So do you think that would make a difference?
I don't think it would, to be honest, because remember, I've adopted a term. I've adopted a term for this when they're still in the same, when they're separating, but they're still in the same degree. I call it finishing. So I call it they're finishing with each other. They're not done. So they're still finishing. They're still finishing their influence, even though there's no real precedent for this necessarily in what we're reading. And as a matter of fact, when we get into some of these, when we actually go into the considerations today, he actually talks about when he thinks things are separating and when the aspect he thinks is done. And Bonatii thinks it's done. I think he says it's done once they leave the same degree, but he says somebody else thinks a minute after the degree is over. So the minute after the degree,
that would be something to look into. Yeah.
Right. So, but we also know that separating aspects show up in the natal chart.
Exactly.
They show up. They don't. It's not like they dissolve. They cease to exist. They're just not as acute, or rather, that's what we're trying to figure out. Or rather, that's what we believe, or I believe, is that they're not as acute, and also the fact that there's a different application happening in every chart. Right, different things are applying. Right, this is a Mercury-Mars application, which we also know. Now, this is the other thing I brought up. Mercury-Mars is the highwayman, the criminal. So, right, Mercury. So there could be this person, and I brought it up. I said, hey, Mercury-Mars is highwayman. Mercury-Mars, I had one client who had Mercury-Mars, and she went through a phase of compulsive lying. That's Mercury-Mars. So that's my point, is that this person may just be unconscious about the ways in which they are an affront to others.
Yeah, sure.
So but no, I don't think that it would, if Mars and Mercury were switched in place, I don't think it would be that different. The fact that they aren't is highly significant, though.
Exactly.
Right, because ultimately what's being pushed, the person is being pushed towards the 6th house. Right. So the person, right, so that's the pushing management of this situation. 1st house is pushing themselves onto, right? So the 1st house ruler has knocked at the door and said, hey, can we hang out? Can we play Warcraft or whatever the hell, or the Gods of War or whatever the fuck, or Minecraft or whatever the fuck it's called. Hey, let's play, let's hang out. And Mars says, hey, sure, I just got a whole new PS4 and blah, 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 right? Because he's in his own house, he's in his own domicile. So let's kick some ass, says Mars. And so he's at Mars's house. And whenever, this is the kind of thing where a person says, whenever I hang out with this friend, I act in a way that's not like me. I get into all this trouble. We cuss people out. We get into fights. That's what's going on here.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. So let's go to the next chart, which was this one. Oh, no, is that the same? Are you still saying, so I'm at a point, or which chart are you saying?
Yeah, it's we're still saying the same.
Okay, so here it is. My
Yes.
life dream is to have 5 kids. Okay, my life dream is to have 5 kids by age 45. Will that happen?
Okay, so too many asteroids. Okay.
I know, right? Fuck that.
Yeah. Okay, so the 5th house is Libra, ruled by Venus. And where is Venus? Okay, it's in the 1st house in Cancer. There's Moon in Jupiter.
Okay, so let me first just bring some rules out so that we know,
Okay.
because this is a great chart for the rules. This is a great chart, period.
Yeah.
Because first of all, don't forget your fertile and your sterile signs. Okay. Second of all, the last part of this chart. Oh, wait, maybe I shouldn't say. Maybe I shouldn't. I'm not going to say. So this was actually a very long question that I had to edit in order
Okay.
to have it. But I wanted to keep it all in there. But remember that we're looking for planets that. Okay, wait a second. Let me just do the whole thing. Remember that when we looked at the 5th house, we learned this technique that I had never heard of before, which is we look to see if there are planets that promise children in the 1st, 10th, 11th,
11th, and 7th. Yeah.
That's right. Or 5th, right? And then so that the planets that do promise children were Venus, Jupiter, the Moon, Mercury, and the ruler of the part of fortune and the ruler of the 5th.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then the planets that deny children were Mars,
Saturn.
and Saturn and the Sun.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So keeping that in mind and keeping in mind what this question, what do you think? So can this person have 5 children by 45?
What I'm seeing here is Venus is applying a conjunction to Mars
Mm-hmm.
in the 5th house.
Is that
Oh, first house. The first house.
Is that a good thing for Venus?
No, it's not. I don't think so.
Okay.
Mars is in its fall.
Okay, but
That's a more
Cancer is
malefic
fertile.
Mars.
But Cancer is fertile.
Okay. It is,
Can I
but
ask something?
it's in Sagittarius and that's infertile.
And Louise wants to
yeah,
add
sure.
something. Yeah, please.
Okay, yeah, because the Cancer Venus, you know, yeah, connection. Would it make, when Mars is included, would it make it more dreamy, or would it make it more what to say, masculine
More
in
rash.
terms of love?
So more Krieger, more Krieger. It would make her more Krieger.
Yeah, exactly. Krieger. Yeah, Krieger. Yeah.
Yeah, it would make her more Krieger. So
Yeah.
it would make her more warlike. Yeah. So and remember that when we continue, so there's so much to remember. That's the issue with astrology. There's so much to kind of keep in the forefront of the mind. And so remember that when any planet is conjunct a malefic planet, that's not good for that planet. But when any planet is conjunct a benefic planet, it's good. So what we've got here is it's good for Mars, but not good for Venus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? So in this particular case, we're looking more at, can the planet produce, than how will it behave? Right? It will, if we are talking about behavior, then Venus is un Kriegerin. She's a warrior. So Venus is a warrior then, right? Because she's with Mars.
Yes.
Yeah, she's a gladiator. Yeah.
Right, she's a gladiator, exactly. So it's about Krieg. But if she's not, but for Mars, that makes him the artistic, or makes him amorous and sexual.
Yeah.
See the difference? So here's something to think about. The Venus's, her milieu is the bedroom. Mars, right? Mars's milieu is the battlefield. So when Venus and Mars are together, she coaxes him off of the battlefield. She washes off all the blood and gore and stink. And then, they have that fabulous night in her bed.
Okay.
In her bed, right? But we could also do the same thing where when Mars takes over Venus, he toughens her up. He teaches her how to use weapons. He teaches her how to kick ass. He makes her into a gladiator. So same thing. She makes a lover out of him. He makes a gladiator out of her.
Oh, okay.
But now we're talking about the 5th house and children. So we're really wondering, can this Venus produce for this chart? We don't care if she's a gladiator or not. We do care if she's in a detriment or if she's conjuncting a malefic.
It is conjuncting malefic.
Right? She's also applying to the trine of a benefic.
Yeah, it's domiciled, but it's retrograde.
But so which means there is a return of virtue happening.
Yeah.
But there is reception, and they're in each other's exaltation. There's reception, and she's in an angle. So this is return of virtue with fitness.
Okay.
Right? So that says, but that leaves it only up to Venus to make it happen. This is what I'm realizing. This is what I'm realizing about return of virtue, is that it puts the onus of making things happen on the planet that's doing the pushing, on the planet that's applying, right? Whereas if Jupiter weren't, then Venus and Jupiter together would be making this happen. Yay! Right?
Also,
because
Mars is also applying to Jupiter. If Venus is, then Mars is also.
He is, but he's in fall, right? And we also know that when a planet is in some kind of aspect to a planet in its fall, that's not good. When a planet is in an aspect to some kind of planet that's retrograde, that's not good.
Yeah.
Right. So these are we don't know how not good is really. I guess that's the question: is how not good is it going to be? So there's so many mixed aspects here because look, there's Saturn in the 11th, right? Saturn denies children, but guess what? Saturn rules the part of fortune.
It does, yeah, right on the cusp.
So he could probably produce children. The ruler of the 5th is the Mars, 2, because Scorpio is intercepted in the 5th. So 4th and 5th house are both here. So our 11th. So Venus and Mars rule both the 5th, and both rule the 5th and the 11th. And look, her life dream, there's the 11th house, is to have children. There's the 5th house. And her life dream, the 11th house and the 5th house is in the 1st. So so there's something that said to me, possibly not. So the rest of this chart is first of all, we saw that the Jupiter here is retrograde. What house does he rule? Or houses does he rule besides the 10th? We know that.
6th house.
Okay. So looking at this Jupiter retrograde in the 10th, we know that, remember, the joy of Jupiter is Sagittarius, not Pisces. So would he be more inclined to act towards that house? This is just a theoretical question. I was in a great Vedic astrology room on what is it called? It's this thing online. It's on your phone, and it's basically like live podcasting with a bunch of different people. It starts with a C. I forget what it's called. Anyway, but it's like you can start these rooms and talk. We did a Vedic astrology room, and she was talking about how, it's Jupiter, but Jupiter will be inclined towards the sign that is his multricone. And multricone means like the root, his kind of root corner is the actual translation of that. And every planet has one in Vedic. And it's kind of like the planetary joy by sign. And remember, Jupiter's planetary joy by sign is Sagittarius because he's a daytime masculine planet. So this might then mean, even though he's in his own sign in the 10th, it would also mean that probably he would bring the 6th house element to the 4 as well.
Yeah.
Right? And then who's in the 6th? The moon is, and look at how the moon is applying to the square of Jupiter.
Yeah.
So this woman found some kind of lesions in her pelvic region that she thinks are coming from her ovaries. And so she's now worried that she can't have children.
Oh,
Isn't that interesting? So we see Saturn, the ruler of the part of fortune, rules the 7th and the 8th, which represents the pelvis and the ovaries, right? The reproductive organs. There he is in the 11th, in her hopes and wishes. So even though he can maybe produce it, he's also he's presenting himself as an impediment. Now this Jupiter takes on a different idea altogether, doesn't it? Because now the Venus and the Mars are applying to the ruler of the 6th. Okay.
yeah.
So the part of children, since it's a nighttime chart, we take Jupiter, we take Saturn to Jupiter. So that's back 30 and back another 6. Back 30 is 12 Gemini or 13 Gemini. Back another 6 is 7 Gemini. Gemini is what kind of sign?
Is it sterile?
It is. It's a sterile sign. Mercury is what? In Leo, retrograde. Leo is what kind of sign? Leo is what kind of sign? Sterile sign.
Sterile, yeah, it's also sterile.
Leo, and Mercury is retrograde. Notice how the moon is trining also the Mercury. So we've got the moon squaring a retrograde planet and trining a retrograde planet. So remember, that's one of those things that they said in this Bonatii, is that when the moon is making any kind of aspect to retrograde planets, that affects her badly.
Yeah.
Right? Or that affects her. And here's the thing. Jupiter is the natural significator for fertility. Mercury is the ruler of children. Mercury is the ruler of the part of children. She's making the trine to him, but it's returning its virtue to her. There is no reception, and the moon is in the 6th house. So this is a return of virtue with detriment.
Detriment.
Same thing with this one. Oh, no, not the same with this one, because the moon is received. So the moon is received by this Jupiter, but that's not really helpful because Jupiter rules the 6th. Mercury, with the Mercury, she's not, there is no reception. Matter of fact, she's in the detriment of Mercury, right? So Mercury is returning that virtue with detriment. So I think that maybe one child is possible. Certainly 5 children not.
Yeah.
In my
There's
opinion.
so many mixed significations here, yeah.
Right. So the significations are really, really mixed. Really mixed. But which makes me believe a child is possible. A child.
You know what's interesting here is that I see that this person has used so many asteroids, like they just want to hear that they can, right? Because they wrote in later saying that they've always wanted to be a lawyer. Like this person is very, look, and of course you've got the part of fortune in the 9th here, right? So they also said they always want, and Jupiter rules the law, everything. He's right in the 10th. So it's all of a piece, right? It's all making sense. But Saturn is in the 11th, and he is peregrine. Right, so he's not going to be fully behaved, right? He's not in his own sign or exaltation. He's not going to be fully behaved. He is going to make some mischief, and his kind of mischief is saying no, is creating obstacles. So I have a feeling that as far as a lot of the big dreams or a lot of the main dreams in this chart, there will be a little bit of a rude awakening because of Saturn here, even though it's the ruler of the part of fortune. So I think some of what she wants can happen. Much of it may not happen by when she wants it to, right? Since it's Saturn and he's slow and circuitous. He doesn't go the straight and narrow usually, right? So you get there, but it's always longer and never by the route you started, So that's the kind of thing I'm seeing with this chart. How about this one? I've never really been in love. I've often felt a strong attraction to someone, but it has often disappeared very fast for me. Okay.
All right. So what are we talking about? We're talking about Venus in the 7th, right?
Yep.
But we're also talking about something else too, right? We're talking about the moon.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, because we're talking about how the moon filters love relationships, right? So Venus does it Venus is love, but it's the moon that says, yes, I will, no, I won't. right? Or the moon that, or it's the moon that has to be in communication with Venus for desire to happen and work, right? Okay, so what's going on here? Talk to me about it.
Oh my God, both the Venus and Mercury are like screwed here.
Okay.
They combust. The
Right.
Venus is fall.
This is in detriment and combust, right?
Yeah, and it's a cadent house. Oh my God.
And it's a Caden, and well, yeah, and a Caden, you're right. It's Caden house, 10 degrees away from the descendant, so not quite there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then look at the Jupiter. So remember, we were talking about the moon. Now, this is the problem, in my opinion, because okay, so once again, when we want to keep, especially if we're looking at natal charts, we want to kind of keep in mind this idea about locating the soul, locating the soul of the person, because the soul of the person is the moon and Mercury, and then whoever rules those two planets. And then if there's any planet that is just, that kind of shows itself to be the solitary significator of soul. And so what we have here is the moon is ruled by Jupiter, who's in Gemini. And Mercury is ruled by Mars, who's in Gemini. Bringing us to Mercury. So Mercury is really the sole significator of the soul in this chart. If you remember from last week when we talked about Mercury, Mercury is about the lack of maturity. This is why I'm sure that Gemini and Virgo are sterile signs, because Mercury represents youth and young children.
Ah, great point.
He doesn't represent adulthood, right? And
Exactly.
remember when we talked about the ages of man, Mercury represents between 4 and 14.
Yes.
He represents our formative years to adolescence. Venus represents adolescence to young adulthood. So in that respect, when we think about Mercury, that's also why I said last week that a lot of these charts where we see Virgo and Gemini, or especially Gemini, proliferating when people haven't had children, they never got around to it. They had the kind of lifestyle that never got around to marriage and children, all of those milestones of adulthood, those rites of adulthood that take you away from youth and childhood. They never got married. They lived with somebody for 12 years and they never had children and they never got married, and now they're 45 or something. I mean, you see a lot of that with Gemini and Virgo representing what's going on with fertility, in my opinion. And so I think it's the difference between can't have children, which tends to be about Leo and about having Mars in the 5th, and miscarriages, or Saturn and Sun, Saturn, and Mars, and how they deny children, versus Mercury, the Mercury signs, and how they don't bring you into the stages of life that would happen, where it would happen.
Yeah.
So once again, it's just me kind of ruminating and pontificating and postulating, but that's kind of my thought. So, but the main thing I've noticed absolutely is that Gemini hates intimacy. Gemini does not have any time for intimacy. That is really, and remember, I've got Jupiter in Gemini. I've got my chart ruler in Gemini. I'm 56. I've never been in a relationship, in a long-term relationship. I try to turn every lover into a friend. I'm not comfortable with the one-on-one intimacy. As a friend, absolutely, I'm the most intimate friend you'll ever have. But if you want to become my boyfriend, you will get shoved into the friend category, because I just don't want to deal with that. So Gemini has problems with that. Gemini has problems taking it deeper, taking the connection deeper. It loves connecting, but don't try to take it deeper. It's not always deeper. And see, the moon, remember I said the moon is kind of the issue here. Jupiter's in Gemini. Jupiter rules Pisces. He's in Gemini. Now, and then we also have the fact that Mercury and Venus are together, but they're all in this deep combustion with the sun.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they don't even, so it's really about how they feel, right? I've never really been in love. They're not talking about, why don't I attract a boyfriend? That's what we usually see, right?
Hey, Mark, I have a question here.
Yeah,
Sorry, but I need to check something. What's the minute of the sun? Is it
58.
1358?
58.
And
So
the Venus is
the Venus is in
1340?
Casimir. Yeah, so it's
Casimir, yeah, that was,
not quite,
yeah.
not quite yet. So 2 minutes. She's still got 2 minutes. And the Mercury
Ah,
yeah, the Mercury.
oh my God, just 2 minutes.
Hmm. So they're just
Yeah.
they're just in the absolute deepest combustion they can be.
Yeah. Oh my God, she's so close to Casimir.
Right, without being, you know, and I'm wondering about Casimir, to be honest with you. I mean, it's something to explore. And you know, we just saw Ella Fitzgerald's chart and how amazing Casimir is with that. And then, if you remember, way back, we looked at Oprah Winfrey's chart, and that was the first chart that started me thinking about it. So, I mean, it makes me wonder. But it makes me wonder. You know, in Ella Fitzgerald's chart, the Casimir is with the Venus in domicile. You know, and so it makes a lot of sense that it would make a planet that's in domicile really strong. But what does it do to a planet that's in detriment, like this Venus, right? I mean, like what would it do? So that's my, you know, it's such a rare thing to find. It's such a rare thing to find, first of all. But I think the moon is more of an important factor. And look at how the moon's also with Rahu. So the moon, yes, I think the moon is and look at how the moon is also sextile the Saturn, cold. This person's cold, right? Pisces is cold and wet. Saturn is cold and dry. Capricorn is cold and dry, right? I mean, yeah. So this person on the lunar, and look at how the next applying thing is the square to Mars. This person is argumentative and a little bit cold.
Oh yeah.
Right? This person's not really, they love debate, right? This person loves debate. And, you know, right? Because the fifth house, Jupiter, is there with the Mars. This person loves, you know, arguing but not, it doesn't have to be like because you don't like anybody, but this person loves a good argument. And is, you know, an empath, and so probably has, you know, has some empathic tendencies and, you know, arguing for the underdog and that kind of thing. And then also kind of, you know, kind of maybe can be a little cold and off-putting. So a little bit aggressive verbally, a little bit cold. Venus is Kriegerin. And look, she's with the sun, right? The sun's exalted. So this hot and dry of the sun, both this Venus and Mercury are taking on all this hot and dry. That's why I'm wondering, if this Venus were Casimir, she would just go super hot and dry. This is this is Wonder Woman. This is Wonder Woman Amazon.
Yeah.
You know? Really helpful for the sun. So really helpful for this person's career. This person may have a super overbearing mother, and I think I mentioned that to them. I think this person may have a mother who's really overbearing. Because look at the Venus with the sun, the Mercury Venus with the sun, maybe a musician or an actress. This person may have like a narcissistic, overbearing narcissistic mother who's like who's an artist.
Could be.
So, okay, so that's that chart. Let's see what the last one is, and then we'll go every romantic connection I've ever, that was an interesting one, yes. Every romantic connection I've been in has ended with my heart being completely shattered, and it's so painful. What those words, shattered and painful, translate into what planet?
Shattered and painful. Can you zoom in on the thing?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Shattered and painful. What are they? What planet represents those two words?
Well, are we talking emotionally or physically?
Just the words themselves. Shattered, painful. What planet comes to mind?
Mars?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how we need to be thinking, right? When we see, that's what this whole kind of looking at the titles is about. It's really me. It's really me taking out the code, the astrological code from the sentence, right? So romantic connection is Venus, 7th house. Shattered and painful, that's Mars. I love intimacy. There is Venus, and there is Moon and Venus. Makes me fall very intensely in love. Okay, so there's something going on with the Moon that involves Venus maybe too. So let's look.
Yeah.
Okay, so notice that the Venus's next application is the sextile to Mars.
Mars. Yeah.
And Venus is in what sign?
It's in Virgo,
And Mars is in what sign?
in its own sign, Scorpio.
And so what does that kind of imply for Venus?
Mm,
Garbage, right? Because Venus is in Virgo, which is her fall, and she's applying to a planet that's in her detriment.
yes. Exactly. Yes, yes, yes.
And Venus is in the 12th,
Ooh.
wailings and lamentations. So so there's the shattering of the heart right there.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so there's, right, so it's a sextile. It's a sextile, right? It should, I mean, it should be good. See, this is the problem with thinking of sextiles and trines as good. They're easy, not good. They're easy. They make it easy, right? And so when Venus is applying to a planet, when Venus is already in fall and she's applying to a planet in her detriment, and it's in her detriment, that's a kind of a double whammy. And look at how strong the planet in her detriment is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? He's way stronger than she is. So he can cause pain. He makes it easy to cause pain to this Venus. Right? Her heart gets shattered. He breaks.
And she said that intensely in love, and that's a Venus Mars thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Scorpio too, right? Scorpio's intense.
Exactly.
Right? So then this whole thing of loving intimacy, right? So is there any kind of connection around that with the, so the interesting thing for me is that there's not that much connection with the moon. Notice that moon is in its own sign, and Mercury is in the sun sign, right? So these are the two significators for soul. So this is part of the problem, right? And Louise has this exact thing going on in Leo. Part of the problem is the difficulty of that's going on with the moon, with this person's emotional life. This person's very, very kind of emotional and needy. It's different, obviously, for Anne Louise because it's in Leo. But for this one, this person's extremely emotionally reactive and reaching for something all the time.
Yeah.
Right, because
same here.
Reach for you too. Okay.
Yeah, but I do have I've had that part, but also, as you said, the other part. Where don't come too close.
Yes. And part of that is because in Leo, the emotional things that would happen would affect your identity. They would affect you. Oh, am I good enough? Oh, look at what's happened. Oh, how will this come on? So it would create all of this. It create a sense of being unsure, and a second guessing myself because I don't want to appear to be stupider than I know I really am. I'm smarter than this. I'm better than this. Why can't I show myself at my best? It would be that kind of thing for you. This person.
Exactly.
Okay, so for this person, they can't really control their emotions, and they can't see them coming. They can't see the emotional state coming because the moon is combust. So even their own emotional state is a little bit of a quandary, of a mystery to them. And so it's just kind of coming out of nowhere. For you, what's coming out of nowhere is these kind of these emotional hits to your self-concept. In this person, it's their own emotions that are coming out of nowhere.
Exactly. And also in my there's eclipse involved as well. Ah,
right. So there's always that fear that something is happening that's snuffing me out, or snuffing out my good works, or I did something and something's gonna fuck it up, or something has fucked it up, right? So there's that kind of, this is different. We don't know if there's an eclipse involved with this one as well, but because of the different sign, right? Yours involves the sun, so the sun is gonna create the agenda, which is all about how do I appear? What is my, what are people recognizing me for? How am I being, do they recognize me? Oh my God, right? Put on your sunglasses. We don't want anybody to recognize us. That's Leo. That's Sun and Leo. But here with Sun, Moon, and Cancer, it's all about, ooh, that wave came out of nowhere. Oh my God, I almost
Mm.
went under, right? I almost went under. That wave came out of nowhere. Oh my God, did you feel, oh shit, not again, right? It's that kind of thing with this chart. So
Yeah.
that might be why they're so intense. It's so intense for them too, right?
And
Because
lots of nervousness and exactly. Yeah.
right. So it's also, or there, once again, like I said, this chart is constantly reaching for something because it's always trying to get an idea what's going on with its emotions, right? The emotions are coming out of nowhere. So this chart is always, oh, I need that piece of chocolate, or, oh, I need a new boyfriend, or so when new kind of, see, that's what I'm talking about with that's
like every quarter, every third month, they want a new life. Now I want a new boyfriend, then now I want to get engaged. Oh no, that's not him. He was just the worst mistake of my life. Catastrophe.
Exactly. And notice also that Venus is applying to the trine of Jupiter here, who's the ruler of the seventh, right? So this Venus is very, and of course, the problem is the Mars-Jupiter opposition, which it's finishing. He's at 59, Jupiter is at 08, right? So this is finishing still. They're still in the same degree, but Mars is almost leaving. So there's this opposition. That's the problem with finding a relationship, right? And the problem with the shattering, because when she gets involved in the seventh house, Mars comes to shatter it. Right? But then there's also Venus applying to the trine of the Jupiter. So that's where the love of the intimacy and the loving the romantic connection and feeling so intensely, that's where that's coming from. Right? So this Jupiter is really involved, I mean, rather this Venus is really involved with this opposition. So that's one of the reasons that even though Venus isn't tied into what's going on with this, right? Mercury is the ruler of the ascendant, and he represents the soul along with the moon. It's really just this conjunction is representing the soul in this chart. But the other system is this opposition with Venus sextiling. It'd be interesting. Oh, who rules the part of fortune? Because that'll give us an idea, won't it? Of course, it's still Mercury, right? Because it's 4 degrees, just 4 degrees away. So still Mercury. So really, this conjunction is what's going on. This conjunction, and I guess, and since there's nothing else happening in the chart but this system, that's preoccupying this. Right? There's no connection. I mean, except by triplicity, right? Venus is the triplicity ruler of water. So we could use, okay. Venus is the first triplicity ruler of the seventh house, which would represent marriage. So that makes sense. There we go. But it's still not necessarily connecting us, except in the fact that she also, any water sign, this thing with Venus is going to be involved. Does that make sense? Let me just say that one more time, because this is something that I've been using for kind of a while. If you remember when we talked about triplicities and triplicity rulers, each element has 3 different planets that rule. And you've been seeing me do it for each house where I've been talking about, oh, this triplicity ruler represents this and this one represents this. But also remember that there are 3 triplicity rulers for each element, meaning that, okay, right. So follow me to here. That means that those 3 planets are going to they're going to participate in how every sign in that element acts. Let me show you by example. So we'll use the water triplicity. So the 3 planets, it's daytime. The 3 planets for the water triplicity are Venus, Mars, and the moon. That means that Venus, Mars, and the moon, that their condition is going to affect how Scorpio acts, how Pisces acts, and how Cancer acts. So how any planet in those sign acts is also going to be affected by how those 3 planets acts. So it's going to be affected, obviously, primarily, let's just use Cancer as an example. Cancer is primarily going to be affected by the moon and then by Jupiter, but then by Venus, Mars, and the moon. Do you get it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Every chart has a different setup, right? If we go back to the other chart we were just looking at for a second, I've never really been in love. Okay, let's look at the fire signs here, because that's the 7th house, right? This is a 7th house related, this is a moon and 7th house related thing. So fire signs. So the fire sign triplicity rulers are Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn.
Yeah.
Here's Sun, right on in the 6th, right, with the Venus and the Mercury. We were already talking about what this does to the Venus and the Mercury. So here's the Sun, who's very, very strong, right? So that could mean that this could bring it in. Notice that this person didn't say they're not attracting people. They didn't say that. They're saying they've never been in love. They're saying that they're not responding to the people that they attract, which is why I used the moon instead as the main significator for this question. They didn't say, why doesn't anybody want to be my boyfriend? They said, the people that I'm just not getting excited about any of the people that are coming to me. What is that about? Very different.
Yeah.
So already Sun in Aries, I generally don't like the Sun in the 7th. Usually when on Reddit we see charts where they're having problems, like I said, we see the Mercury signs, we see the Saturn signs, or I see the Sun in the 7th. I often see the Sun in the 7th. I don't think it's good for the 7th. And also look, Sun is squaring exactly the Saturn. Right? So we could make the Sun the ruler of this chart, of this 7th house, right? Because he's exalted. He's stronger than the Mars. Mars is peregrine. Sun is very, very strong. And look, he's with the benefic. So this strong is really, really in good shape, except for the fact that he's in the 6th house. So we could make him the 7th house ruler. But look, bam, he's squaring Saturn. That's not any good. And what do we know about Saturn? Saturn cools it down, right? Saturn cools things down. And he's squaring him from his fall. So he's pushing fall at Saturn. So that's already a problem. We're talking about the triplicity rulers of the 3rd house, of the 7th house of fire. And then look, we already talked about Jupiter. Jupiter's in Gemini, which is his detriment. And he's in the same sign with Mars, which is a malefic, right? So we can already tell the first triplicity ruler is in a square to Saturn. The second triplicity ruler is in detriment and is in the same sign with the malefic. And then the third triplicity ruler is in a malefic square to the ruler of the 7th. So we know the 7th house isn't working. Just from the triplicity rulers. We knew it from the Mars and Gemini. I knew it from the Mars and Gemini the minute I saw it. And, and also, like I said, I don't like the Sun with the 7th either. But really, when we look at these 3 triplicity rulers, we get a completely different idea. So that means that there's going to be issues with the public life and the mother. Remember I talked about the mother? And there's going to be problems with close friends who are like family and siblings. So all of that profile of these triplicity rulers is going to show up there as well. We'll do it with one other chart. And then we'll move to considerations. Oh, we haven't looked at this chart yet.
Which one?
It's coming up.
Okay.
High sex drive, obsessive about beauty.
Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah. High sex drive, obsessive about beauty.
I cannot see it very clearly. Wait. Okay.
Better?
Yeah. Okay, it's doable.
All right. So high sex drive. What would we be looking for? What would we be looking for that?
Fifth house.
We'd be looking for Venus, right? But we'd also be looking for
Oh, yeah.
licentious signs.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
would be looking for licentious signs to see if there's signs of high coitus. But we would also be looking for Venus, and yeah, why not the fifth house? So let's break it down. So the first thing I see is that Mars is with Saturn.
Mhm.
That doesn't really seem very much like what they're talking about.
Yeah, but it's separating.
But still, I mean, it's
Okay. Yeah.
but the vibe of it is not very Venusian, is it?
Yeah.
However, when we look at Venus, what do we see?
Venus is in Pisces.
She's exalted, and she's also
Exalted.
applying to her ruler.
Ah, yes.
But the problem with that is that he's in detriment and
Detriment, retrograde.
retrograde. So he's returning that virtue. And she can handle it because she's technically in the fourth house. So this is a return of virtue with what's the word we're using, with fitness. However, so once again, that means that only Venus can make the seventh house work in this chart, right? So the Venus-Jupiter opposition isn't really helpful. The Jupiter isn't going to help out with that. Only Venus can only do it on her own, which is not bad because she's in a good sign. So certainly with Venus in her own exaltation and angular, right? So she's advancing. That would certainly say that there is an interest in that. Now, here's the other thing that shows us that it's something of an obsession. The 12th house. Venus rules the 12th.
Yeah.
And note that the Saturn Mars is in the fourth house. What this looks like is this person comes from a very unhappy home life. Mars and Saturn, very authoritative, maybe higher, very religious, fundamentalist religious.
Yeah, and they're both malefics in the same house.
Right, and it's right. So anger and frustration, maybe even so might even be could even be some physical abuse in there. And I think that this is an escape hatch. I think this obsession with beauty and sex is an escape hatch. It's the self-undoing as a result of the negative stuff that's gone on at home. Be interesting to find out if that's the case or not. I didn't write to this person. I just kind of used it. I just decided to use it. I love this chart, and I love charts that want to talk about sex anyway, as you know. But I definitely think this is fascinating. And also notice that the moon's last aspect was the opposition to Mars, right? So this person has gone through some violence. This person has gone through some. So there's a cold. I think the father figure might be cold and violent and authoritarian, and this person has gone through it. And so the Venus is the escape hatch into. I wasn't looking at this chart in that way. I don't even know why I decided. I think I probably just decided to use it because I saw the high sex drive. Notice that the moon is in a licentious sign.
Yeah, it is.
And Venus is exalted.
Exalted, yeah.
Right, the sun, the ruler of the moon, is in Pisces as well, right? So it's in the same sign with this Venus. So the Venus is really ruling the Pisces because the Jupiter can't do it. So that's also something at some point we will talk about, or we can talk about a little right now, is this idea of sometimes planets aren't fit for the houses they rule, right? Jupiter can't sustain this because he's not only in detriment, he's retrograde. He's compromised fully. So that means this person's second house and seventh house aren't going to work very well. But that does also mean that Venus can take over the fifth house for Jupiter. She can't necessarily take over the second house, but she can take over the fifth. This is where the idea of these triplicity rulers can come in and maybe help. because we would be looking at the triplicity ruler for fire. So it's nighttime, it would start with Jupiter, right? We already know that's shitty, and he's also the ruler. So we already know that that's shitty. The second triplicity ruler is the sun, who's in the 5th house, but peregrine, but better than nothing. So that's not so bad. So we also know that the second time of life financially will be better than the first time of life. Then we come to the 3rd time of life, and that's really the best, except for the fact that it's with Mars. So what I would say is probably the very latter part of life, they will probably do best financially, but there will be contentions around it, or there'll be problems with it. So this Saturn, on some level, this Saturn could take over as the ruler of the 2nd house. Now, of course, if we knew where the part of fortune is, it's 210 degrees plus 3. So it's in Gemini, 17 Gemini. So that's not really that great. Mercury and Aries, peregrine, very close to the 6th house. That's not so useful. So maybe this Saturn might be the best thing to use as a significator for substance for this person. But like I said, what were we going to say?
Yeah, I was going to ask that this is a nighttime chart, right?
Yes.
So the Saturn here is in domicile. Would it be like a more malefic or a lesser malefic because it's in its own domicile? Like if I think it like this, like it's in its own house, so it can do like more mischief. It's free to do the mischief.
No. Being in its own house takes the mischief away. Think of it this way. The malefic planet is at their most constructive when they are in their own sign or exaltation.
Okay.
They are at their most destructive when they're in their detriments or fall or peregrine. Okay. Right?
Okay.
So we know that, matter of fact, that's going to come up. So for this next hour, we're going to go, because I'm done with my charts that were my kind
all
of.
right. Yeah.
So the next hour, we're going to go to that. But no, if a planet is in its own sign, it's actually what you were saying. It actually is behaving much better. What's fucking with this Saturn is the Mars. Right? If the Mars weren't there, then this Saturn would be very, very, I would have no problem recommending it at all. It's only because thankfully the Mars is separating, but only because the Mars is there that I have any kind of problem.
Reservations around it, yeah.
Yes, with it. Okay, so that will fit. So those are our sample charts that we were talking about. And so what I want to come to is this 9th consideration, or is it the 8th? Okay, yeah, the 9th consideration. Okay, so I've been avoiding this one because I wanted to kind of get into it a little bit on my own for a while, but we don't really have to. But it's something to look at, and to be also, it's something that I think may need to be expanded a little, because in my opinion, I found an example or two which I think are a little bit away, but still kind of work. So what he basically is talking about is that Bonatii believed that this was a really important thing, and that he believed that this was a really important consideration, and that people didn't really use it, and that was why people screwed up and got things wrong. That this was one of the main reasons that people got things wrong. And it was this idea of hidden helpers and open helpers. Hidden helpers, hidden hinderers, open helpers, open hinderers. Okay, so, and what we see here, the strongest hidden helper, stronger, strong, weak hidden helper, weaker hidden helper, weakest hidden helper, strong open helper, hidden harmers. So we're looking for helpers and harmers. And now remember, we're talking about specifically everything is within this context of, will the matter come to be? Will it happen? So what he's really talking about is, if you're asking about, am I going to have children, like that one chart is, and you see the significator involved in this thing with a hidden helper or an open helper, you need to pay attention, is what he's basically saying. And this is a hidden and secret matter among the secrets of the judgment of the stars. about which the ancients were not concerned. And they said nothing openly about it, which I found, except that blah, 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 right? Nor do I believe they dismissed them on account of ignorance, but more likely because they were not accustomed to it and because they did not want to cause weariness in their listeners or readers, right? But he thinks that people screw this up. So he says, you know, they looked at the planets and they looked at the part of fortune, but they didn't take this into account. But in your judgment, you ought to consider those things which they considered in theirs, which would be the planets and the part of fortune, and besides that, whatever other connected things you can consider. So when we're looking for the strongest hidden helper, the strongest hidden helper is a fixed star, which is of its nature, of the nature of the planet, okay, in which he has domicile or exaltation, and is with him in the same minute. Okay, so this basically they're saying if a planet in their own domicile or exaltation is on a strong fixed star to the minute, that star will help the significator in such a way and to such an extent that the matter will be perfected, even beyond the intention of the querent or the one beginning it or doing it. Okay, so be begun. So if you're, and look at what he says, when you erect some figure, you ought to consider and see the ruler of the quesited matter, right? That's the thing we're looking for. Or the thing undertaken, which is of course for an election, or a thing to be begun or to be done, which would be for an election. So that's the significator we're looking for. And to see if one of the fixed stars, which is of its nature, so that's of the nature of the significator, is in a place in which he has domicile or exaltation and is with him in the same minute. So if we were talking about having children, they're talking about the fifth house ruler. Is the fifth house ruler in the exact minute with Regulus or Antares or Fermalhaut or some other of the major first magnitude fixed stars? Okay, so that would be the strongest hidden helper. Now, hidden in this text is the idea of what the strongest part of the house is. Because now look, if the star were with the significator in the same degree from 1 minute to 16 minutes in front or 5 minutes behind, it will help him, but not much. Oh no, sorry, this we don't get to it. When we get to the open helper, that's when we start talking about it. So what we see is that really a fixed star can only be a major help if the planet is conjuncting it within 50 minutes. Okay, so this myself is something that I think we can stretch a little bit. Look also, if indeed it were with him in the same degree, in a place in which the significator had 2 or lesser dignities in the same minute from up to 1 to 16, it will help even less. So we can see the hierarchy. If it's in its exaltation or its own sign, and it's in the exact degree. If it's in its exaltation or its own sign, and it's between 1 minute away and 16 minutes away, or 5 minutes behind it, that's okay. Then if it's in the same degree and it's between 16 to 50 minutes, it helps even less. And then if it's in the same degree, but it's not in its exaltation or domicile, but it's in 2 of the lesser dignities like triplicity and term, or face and term, and it's in the same minute or up to a 16 minutes, it helps even less. So that's really, so it's all about kind of dignity of the planet and distance from the star, but no more than 1 degree. So, and then very last, if it were in the same degree, distant from the significator by more than 16 up to the 50th, it will help him less than that, and this will be a weaker hidden helper. And indeed, and if it were in a place in which the significator did not have any dignity, so that if it's just any planet on that, it will help him somewhat, but practically imperceptibly, and this will be the weakest hidden helper. Now, I'm not sure I agree with this, and we're going to look at some charts that talk that. As a matter of fact, let's do that right now.
Yeah, because I'm literally struggling with this. In charts, it would be easier to see.
Well, what's going to be easy to see is why I think it's not necessarily correct, or why I think it needs to be expanded. So this is the chart of Luciano Pavarotti, who became one of the most one of the most famous people in the world. But look at his chart. Leo rises, but here is the sun cadent in Libra in its fall.
Yeah.
Here is Venus in Virgo. Here is the moon in the 9th. Here is the Saturn in an angle, but not in the same sign as the angle or in the same sign as the part of fortune. Now, here's the thing. Luciano Pavarotti has Saturn on the exact degree of one of the four important major first magnitude fixed stars. They are Regulus, Antares, Aldebaran, and Fomalhaut. Fomalhaut is at 4 degrees of Pisces.
Oh.
And look at how it's the ruler of the part of fortune on this Fomalhaut. There is nothing else in this chart, almost nothing else in this chart that gives us an idea of fame.
Yeah, because yeah.
I wondered
right.
about this chart a lot. This chart really bothered me. I was like, I mean, even with my technique with the part of fortune as the ruler of the ascendant for finding fame, it's not as much as I'd like. There are some good things in it, but it's not as much as I would like. It's not as much as some other people. But when I saw that the Saturn is on the Fomalhaut, that said to me, okay, we need to be looking at this for that. Here's another chart. At the same time that Luciano Pavarotti became world famous, so did Placido Domingo. They became famous as the two rivaling tenors in the early 80s. Now, Pavarotti became a little more famous, but if you remember later on, they became the three tenors, and they became famous with Jose Carreras doing that whole three tenors franchise. So Placido Domingo is another one of these charts where I was like, okay, where is the fame? The midheaven is right on Aldebaran.
Oh, it's Gemini.
So the midheaven is right on the Aldebaran. Then, to find another chart, this motherfucker.
Ah.
Oh, this is the wrong
my
chart. This is the wrong chart. Hold on a second. Yeah, I know, right? Everybody recoils in horror at the face of it.
Yeah, I just cringed so hard.
So this fucker. Look at the ascendant. The ascendant is within 30 minutes of Regulus.
Okay.
This is one of the most famous people in the world, and then also became president.
God knows how. But I mean, I think we know how. Yeah.
Yeah, don't need it. But okay, so that's and look, and the Mars is within 3 degrees, but the ascendant. So remember what he was saying is this strong secret helper is when a planet is dignified and super, super close.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, what we're seeing is that it doesn't need to be as close as he's saying.
Yeah.
Right? The Luciano Pavarotti chart showed us that, okay, yeah, that's right on, the Saturn is right there. But, but this is not a planet. This is just the ascendant. The Placido Domingo chart just had the midheaven there, and it was enough.
Yeah.
Right? This chart was enough. Just the ascendant is enough. So it looks like we can amend what we're looking at with this secret helper thing to not just be about specifically essential dignity and major proximity. Obviously, the closer it is, the better, the stronger, right? But that doesn't have to be the case. It doesn't have to be there. It can still work without it being there. It has to, and so can angles. And they don't have to be to the minute, or they don't have to be within 50 minutes. The Placido Domingo chart, the midheaven was within 2 degrees of the Aldebaran. So something to think about. So unless I'm wrong about that, right? So now we come to the open helper. And
Hey,
so,
Garth, can you repeat the name of the fixed stars? It's Aldebaran, Regulus.
Aldebaran. Here, wait a second. I'll open the chat and I'll write it in there too while I talk.
Yeah, that would be easier. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure, of course. Let me stop the share for 1 second. Okay, so yes, so the 4 stars that we're talking about are Aldebaran. Let's see, Regulus.
Okay.
So Aldebaran is Antares
Taurus. Okay.
and Fomalhaut. Okay, so those are the 4 cardinal stars, and there's an archangel connected to each 4. But there are other important fixed stars. Spica and Algol are 2 of the main ones. So those are the main ones that I would look for. So Spica and Algol, Fomalhaut, Antares, Regulus, and Aldebaran. Those would be the ones I would look the most at.
All right.
All right. So so now we're looking for the strong open helper. So the difference is that the secret helper is a star, the open helper is a planet. So the strongest open good helper, and once again, this is if it's an aspect or if it is the planet itself, right? So if we're asking about children and the ruler of the 5th house is conjunct this strong open helper, that would be very good. So the strongest open good helper is when a planet significator of some matter is in its own, okay, so this would be the 5th house ruler itself, is in its own domicile, in an angle, right? In the very minute of the cusp, direct, fast in course, received, free from any impediment, and free from any impediment. Okay, so we already know that state of advancement is angular. Domicile makes it obviously is essential dignity. Fast movement is supposed to be good. Reception takes away evil. Lack of impediment is great for a planet. So if we were to see, for instance, that Venus that was in Pisces. Let's say that Venus was in Pisces in the 10th house, receiving the sextile of Jupiter in Taurus. Or rather, Venus is in the 11th, receiving the sextile of Jupiter in Taurus in the 9th. Okay. Right? So it's in, but okay, at the end of the 10th, let's say it's like that, and Venus and Jupiter's in the 9th or the 8th or something like that. So that would put her in a domicile, in an angle, or she'd be an exaltation, obviously, and she's right on the cusp of the 10th and direct. That would make this planet an open helper, the strongest type of open helper, okay? Then if we have a planet that's in an angle in its own domicile by 1 degree ahead of the cusp or 2 degrees after, free from the malefics and received. So that's a little less strong. What are we noticing? It's about the cusp. The next is if it's in an angle in its own domicile or exaltation ahead by 5 degrees after.
Okay.
It gets, and then the weak open good is 2 of its lesser dignities in an angle, but 5 degrees before, 15 degrees after.
Yeah.
Or if its own domicile or exaltation in succeeding to an angle free from the malefic. So what we can infer from this is that these astrologers believe that the cusp of the house was the strongest part of the house.
Oh, okay.
The Vedic astrologers believe it too. Even though they only use whole sign, they believe that the strongest point in the house is the cusp. So that then means that the most active part of a house is 5 degrees before it and 15 degrees after. 5 degrees before the cusp is the strongest point, and then the most active part of the house is from 5 degrees before to 15 degrees after. That's important. So now we know why a planet that's before the cusp we put into the house. Because the 5 degrees before it are considered really strong. The 3 degrees before it are considered even stronger. The 1 degree before it is considered even stronger.
Yeah.
So that's really important to me. That was a real eye-opener for me when I learned about it. And then the weak or open good one is a planet is in its own domicile or in its exaltation in two of its lesser dignities in the cadence. And then the weakest is in one of its greater dignities or in two of its lesser ones, not aspecting the ascendant. That would be 6, 8, 12, or in only one of its lesser dignities, or 2, or in only one of its lesser dignities aspecting it. So that's like if you had, it's nighttime and you have Mercury in Aquarius trining the ascendant in Gemini, right? So that would be a weak open significator, or joined to a planet aspecting the ascendant, right? And then he only does one example of the bad, but you can basically think about what that would be. The strongest bad one, if it's in a place in which it has no dignity, no joy, not received, besieged by the 2 malefics, cadent from an angle, and cadent from the ascendant. And guess what? In this chart, Venus is in that condition. She's in detriment. She's besieged by both Saturn and Mars and Sun.
Yeah.
Right. So if we're talking about love, remember also this is the ruler of the ascendant. Venus is the ruler of the ascendant here. So really, once again, I'd use this planet to rule the ascendant instead. Now, they're not going to do that naturally, but look at how Venus is also just separating 2 minutes, just separating within 2 minutes from the Saturn.
Yeah.
1 minute in this chart. Yeah, 2 minutes, right? So 2 minutes she's separating. They're still finishing. Saturn and Mercury, Saturn and Sun are still finishing, aren't they? Oh wait, 25 seconds. Wow, so Sun is still applying to Saturn, has 25 seconds to go. So this Venus is besieged.
Is the Sun applying to Saturn?
Venus or Sun?
No, the Sun. The Sun.
Yes, Sun is applying to Saturn. 25 seconds.
But it's 25 seconds ahead, or is it 25 seconds behind?
Behind Saturn. He's at 58.8. Saturn is at 58.35.
Wait, Sun is at 58 and Saturn is at 37.
Oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. I'm looking at the Jupiter. I'm looking at the number for the Jupiter. Sorry, thank you. Oh, 38. I saw 58 instead of 38. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, the writing is, print is very fun.
But still, that puts the Venus in between them.
Exactly. Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Meaning she's translating the Saturn back to the Venus, back to the Mars.
Exactly.
Sun.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So she would now, actually, Bonatii has something interesting to say about translation in here, which I think we should look at. Let's go back to that. But yes, so this chart is an example of an open hinderer. Right. So the Venus here is an open hinderer or harmer. She will harm the matter. So the main matter that Venus represents is what? Love and marriage.
Love and marriage, yeah.
Right? Specifically, she rules this. So there could also be mental illness in this chart, right? Because Venus is in the sign of the head and she rules the head. It's the 6th house.
Also the 12th, yeah.
Also the 12th. Right. Well,
Mm.
Mercury is the natural ruler of the 12th, and he's there.
Exactly.
So there could be some mental illness issues too, but definitely there's a standoffishness and aggression in this chart that makes them, there's a coldness, an internal coldness in this chart that makes them not necessarily interested in romance and might turn people off from them as well. So moving on, so that was it. So that's something we will come back to that. Okay, we will come back to it because I mean, it seems like a lot, but it really isn't, right? Really all it is if a planet is if a planet is in its own sign or exaltation on the exact conjunction of a fixed star, then that fixed star is a secret, strong helper. If a planet is in its own sign, domicile or exaltation, and in an angle and not impeded and received and all of these other things, then it's a secret, then it's an open helper. That planet is an open helper and makes things happen, right? And so then we can see that and it's right on the cusp, right? It had to be exactly on the cusp of the house. So as we can see, as it moves away from the cusp and as it moves away from the signs in which it is dignified, that's where the issues come, or that's where it starts to weaken in its ability to help to make things happen. Okay, this is important because this goes back to how we originally started this entire series, which was with me wondering if how the moon is operating affects everything in the chart, no matter if it's a natal chart or a horary chart. And so of which the first of the 9th consideration is that that the moon has a similarity with inferior generated things, that they mean generative, but namely to the kinds of genera and the individuals of kinds. And this happens to her because of her own effects, which she has in all terrestrial things, and from the frequent revolutions, the which revolutions she makes about the elements and around things made from elements, which is because of her close approach to the earth. And so then he goes into the different circles. He talks about what she's like, when she's the new moon, what she looks like, how she changes, and how all things that are in this inferior plane, which include us, are also subject to this kind of change. But then this is where we want to talk about. This quote is what I want to talk about. And this is, once again, what we need to be thinking about, in my opinion, when we're looking at natal charts especially. Whence the moon is always to be put as the significatrix of every matter and every beginning and every nativity. He says it straight out. And her good condition is the good condition of every matter. And her bad condition is the bad condition of every matter. So that means that if the moon's in fucked up condition, but the ruler of the ascendant and the ruler of the 5th, if we're talking about children, are coming together, does the matter really perfect? That's what he's implying. And it's her virtue, it is her virtue alone and only her power, that even if the Lord of the ascendant or another significator or some matter was impeded, indeed so that it could not do or perfect what it ought, and she were found to be strong, nevertheless the matter will be perfected. For she is the governor. So that's the exact opposite of what I just said, right? What I just said is that if the Lord of the ascendant is strong and she's fucked, ain't nothing gonna happen. What he just said is if the Lord of the ascendant is impeded and she's in good shape, it'll happen. For she is the governess of all matters and is the bearer of the virtues of all the planets toward planets, namely one to the other. Indeed, since she receives the disposition of one planet and carries it away to another. This is where we come. So it seems like there was this tyrant in Italy named Ezzelino da Romano, who was also an astrologer. And he had kind of erroneous beliefs, but because he was a tyrant, he forced his staff astrologer to subscribe to them. And so, because he mentions this earlier, as a matter of fact, he mentions it in the Nativities book. And so he brings him up again here, of which the opinion was the tyrant Ezelina de Romano, namely that when she is separating from one planet, she receives its virtue and carries it to another. This is translation of light. And commits it to the one which she encounters first. Okay. Excuse me. And it seemed to certain people that Saul said the same thing. Saul is a Persian astrologer. But Saul's intention was not absolute, for he believed, now this is where it comes, that the moon would carry what was committed to her. And if it was not committed to her, she would not carry anything to any planet. For the moon, when she is joined to some planet who receives her, then the planet commits its disposition to her, and she carries it with her and commits it to one whom she first encounters in one of its own strengths, and not to another. This is very, very, very specific. According to this, a planet does not give something in a place in which it promised nothing. So let me give an example of it. We don't have a chart necessarily. What?
Sorry, it was just my computer going off.
Oh, did you have a
Sorry.
did you have a question?
No, it was just my computer going off.
Oh, okay. All right. So
Yeah,
because
sorry.
I mean, because I know this is kind of confusing, and this is also kind of this is an important thing that we should be looking at. Because what he's saying is that if the moon, okay, what he's, remember, actually, let me go back a little bit. Let's remember the two different types of pushing, because this is important. There's pushing nature, which is when planet A is in the sign of planet B and is applying to planet B. So that would be if the moon is in Virgo and applying to Mercury in Taurus. Okay, so that's pushing nature. The moon then pushes Mercury and her nature, so Mercury's nature and her nature onto Mercury and helps Mercury. So that's one kind of way that the moon can be received. So let's say the moon is applying to Mercury or has just separated from Mercury. The moon is in Virgo at 18. Mercury is at 16 Taurus. That means that the moon is carrying something from Mercury because Mercury receives moon in that sign. That also means then that the next planet that she comes into contact with, who is in one of its own strengths, she will then she will put the virtue to. It won't be just the next planet. It will be, so this is my point. It's not just if the moon is applying to, let's say the moon is in Libra and she's applying to Mercury in Leo. There's no reception there. What we would usually say is, oh, the moon is going to take Mercury's virtue and then she's going to translate Mercury to Venus in Libra at 21 Libra. So she's going to translate Mercury to Libra, to Venus. But Bonatii here is saying, no, that's not the case. Why? Because there was no reception between the moon and Mercury. So Mercury hasn't promised anything. Mercury hasn't given her anything. See what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Let's look at it. Let's look at a chart and see if we can find an example that kind of at least approximates this. This one's kind of good because, okay, this one's good. The last aspect that the moon made was the square to Jupiter, right? Right. What does that imply? That square, that's a square with reception. Even though Jupiter is in detriment, that's a square with reception because the moon is in Jupiter's sign. Which means that Jupiter then conferred his detriment onto her.
Yeah.
Okay, and now she's going to carry it to the next planet who is in their own dignity, which is Saturn
Saturn.
or the sun. So whoever she touches first. So it's Saturn. Now, if let's say Venus were here, she wouldn't confer it to her. Why? Because Venus wouldn't be, if Venus were in Capricorn, she wouldn't be in a dignity.
Yeah.
Right? It would have to be either the sun or Saturn. So that's what I mean by that's really specific. That's not, that's not run-of-the-mill translation, right? When we're looking at translation, when we've been looking at translation, we haven't seen any stipulation like that.
Mhm.
Or maybe we have, or what we should do is go, oh, let me do that. So while you look at that chart, I'm going to see if I can bring up the Alcabisi and see when he talks about translation, if that's in there. Because I think I do remember reading about it through Benjamin Dykes, with him talking about it. I don't think I remember Alcabisi talking about it. Okay, here we go, transfer. Okay. Okay, comes in two ways. Namely, one, if a light planet would be separated from a weighty one and would be joined to another and would transfer the nature of the one from which it has been separated to one to which it is being joined. Right? There's no specific stipulation like that, like what we just saw in the Bonatii. Secondly, that a light planet would be joined to a planet slower than itself, and the slow one would be joined to another planet, and the slow planet would transfer the nature of the light planet to the one who is being joined, right? So that's just one planet to another. Let's see if that's the same here. Same thing with Alcabisi. And if a light planet is being diverted from a weightier planet and we're connected to another, it transfers the nature of the first to the second. A planet even transfers the nature in another way. This is that a light planet would be connected to a planet more weighty to itself, and the weightier one again to one more weighty than itself. Then the middle one transfers the nature of the light one to the weightier one. It says nothing about reception.
So Bonatii is saying that the moon can only do that. For example, the moon can only do that if the other planet is in its dignity. And they're saying that it can happen either way.
Yes, what the moon is saying, the moon is being Bonati's being even more restrictive.
Okay.
Now, mind you, he's saying that this is what Saul said. So I don't know if this is necessarily what he believes, although maybe he does. Because remember, he already said before in something that I read earlier that Ezzelino da Romano held erroneous views, but he forced those erroneous views on his astrologer. So here, he's saying that the moon needs to either, there need to be three things happening. The moon needs to either be in the sign of planet B and applying to planet B, or planet B needs to be in Cancer or Taurus.
Okay.
Or the moon needs to be in Cancer or Taurus. That's what it's saying. And then that the moon will only confer that particular disposition to another planet that is in its own dignities.
That's very restrictive.
Very restrictive.
Yeah.
So that is completely disconnected from what we think about as translation of light, but it's something interesting to think about. Maybe, and notice that he's saying it's the moon. They're not making any distinction in the other text. They're just saying some lighter planet to some heavier planet. Right? They're not saying the moon. But this one is stipulating specifically the moon. So maybe it's about because remember, the moon is the mediatrix. Then remember, this entire consideration is about what the moon's function is and what she's supposed to be about. So what he's saying is that the moon only takes on from a planet where there is a promise of, where there is some kind of reception. there's only a promise of any kind where there is reception, is what Bonatii is saying that Saul is saying. Right? So if the moon's in Libra and she's applying to the trine of Venus in Gemini, then that's the kind of, then when she separates from the Venus and goes to the Mars in Aries,
Yeah.
right? That's what the moon can do, because Venus has actually given her something. What he's saying is that if the moon is in Libra and she applies to Mars in Leo, or she applies to Jupiter in Leo, Jupiter isn't giving her anything.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's no reception. There's nothing to receive. Therefore, there's nothing to transmit.
Yeah.
There's nothing
So
to
it's saying that the pregnant planets cannot exactly give anything to her.
What did you say? What did you just say?
Like the planets that are not in reception or not in the domicile or exaltation, they cannot exactly produce or give anything to that moon.
They can't give or receive.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? If there's no reception, there's no giving or receiving. Remember that a planet in its own domicile or exaltation can receive any other planet, can receive any planet.
Yeah.
Right? Because, and of course, and if a planet in its own domicile or exaltation is applying to another planet, that's called pushing power, right? Where that planet pushes its power onto the other planet. So in order for the moon, in order for the moon to be, so this is specific to the moon because she's the mediatrix and the transmitter. So in order for the moon to be able to transmit, she has to have been given something. Makes perfect sense.
It does, yeah.
We need to look at this. We need to look at this. Let's just go back to that chart for a second. Because in my opinion, do you see it? Do you see the chart?
Yeah, we do.
Because look, remember when she said, I've never really been in love, and I said, this is about the moon. This is about the moon, I said. Right? It's about their feelings. It's not about the cycle they attract. It's about how they feel. Right? Their feelings are the cycle they attract. And so I was like, this is about the moon. And look, the moon's last application is to this Jupiter in Gemini who doesn't want to be hindered, encumbered, doesn't like intimacy. Jupiter gives her that. Right? She's applied to him, even though he's in detriment, she's applied to him. She's pushed his nature at him. So he's giving her his detriment, which is I'm really into, I can be emotionally very sensitive, but I'm really not interested in going any deeper.
Right.
I'm not really interested in going any deeper than the surface level. He pushes that to her, then she pushes that to Saturn, who's squaring the sun, who is the exaltation ruler of the 7th house.
Yikes.
Right? So she's gonna push, she can't push it to the sun because she's not touching him, but she is touching Saturn. So she's gonna push it to the Saturn. Yeah, so even the fact that she's pushing not wanting intimacy to coldness. Right? Saturn is cold rock.
Like I've felt a strong attraction, but it disappears and very fast for me.
Right.
Like it just goes away. It happens, but it goes away. So
I feel attraction, exactly. It's boom, it's gone. Right? And both the moon and Mercury represent speed. Because right, the moon is the fastest planet.
Yeah.
Right? And Mercury is the next fastest, and he has wings on his feet. Right? So that's the speed of this thing, is that it's, and also, right, the winged signs, the signs with wings are Gemini and Virgo and Pisces. Pisces, Gemini.
Yeah.
So it's flying off to something else. It's flying to the next argument. The moon square Mars. Right? It's flying off to the next argument. It's not really interested in, it's not interested in harmony. It's interested in contention, in debate. Once again, it's interested in debate.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So wait, let's look at this other one. High sex drive, obsessive about beauty. Okay, so the moon's last aspect is to Mars, but look there is no reception. But look at before that. The aspect before that was to Saturn.
Mm.
And there was reception there because Saturn's in his own sign, except for the fact that she's in the detriment of Saturn. So the moon technically could have given it to Mars, but Mars isn't in any dignity.
So it didn't receive it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so the moon kept it, or maybe the moon didn't receive it either. I mean, think about it. Like I said, a planet in its own sign can receive anybody, but look, the moon's in its detriment. So
Yeah.
did Saturn actually receive it? So
Nope.
maybe not, right? Would it receive it? It's different from that last chart where we were talking about Jupiter's detriment, not the moon's, or not. We weren't talking about Jupiter was in his detriment. The moon wasn't in his detriment, right? The moon was in his sign. Jupiter was in his detriment. So she was pushing nature at him and he gave her detriment. But here she's pushing detriment at Saturn.
Yeah, and Saturn's not gonna take it.
I want it, yeah, Saturn didn't want it. Or it's of no help to him, no use to him.
Yeah.
So he's
It's
not
like one
really
of those wedding gifts you get, and it's like this really ugly showpiece, and you put it in the corner.
right. You behind something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So exactly. So you don't want it's kind of what you don't want. So I think this is a really kind of interesting thing to be looking at. What's this other one? Every romantic connection with the shattered heart.
Oh yeah. Oh, let's do this one.
Now this moon's void, of course,
Hmm.
but look, when it was at 15 degrees of Cancer, it was trining Saturn, who is in its exaltation. So also remember, the moon's in its own sign. So the moon's in its own sign. So it would be pushing power to Saturn and also receiving its exaltation from Saturn. So there would be a disposition to give to the sun. But the sun is not really in a sign that it rules of any kind, right? So that's what puzzles me about this, is that it's not just, and actually I think Ben Dykes even thought that it wasn't necessarily that the planet that the moon is going to needed to be in its own domicile or exaltation, but that it should be in one of the moon's exaltations or domiciles, in which case that would be the that would be the case. But this is just something to kind of further kind of look at. So let's move on to the next considerations. Okay, so here basically he's just kind of going into the malefics. So to consider the malefics, and here's where we go into what you were talking about. So Saturn and Mars, as I have said, are naturally malefic. Saturn, for instance, on account of the excessive cold, Mars on account of excessive heat, holding sway and ruling in them. Not that either of them is in truth hot or cold, etc. And it is their effect. But because they signify evil and detriment and impediment in matters, unless the malefics were to receive the significator or the moon by domicile or by exaltation, or by two of the lesser dignities, or the malefics themselves were significators, because then they hold back all malice from him whom they receive, nor do they impede him from whatever aspect they were to aspect. Okay, let's break that down. So if the malefics receive the significator, right? So if there's reception, or the moon by domicile or exaltation. So for instance, if the moon were in Capricorn, if the moon were in Capricorn applying to Mars or Saturn, right?
Okay.
So then they would be less evil. or the malefics themselves were significators, right? So if I'm asking about the 5th house and Saturn rules the 5th, then they hold back all their malice. Right? And so if the moon is in Capricorn applying to Saturn, then they hold back the malice from whom they receive, nor do they impede him from whatever aspect they were at to aspect. That's important. Because they're saying from the opposition or square. Right? He says, oh, it's better if it's from the trine or sextile, but he says they will not hold them back from whatever aspect they are to aspect them from if there is reception. So had the moon been in Aquarius and Saturn been in Leo, that would have worked. But with the moon in Leo and Saturn being in Aquarius, that did not work. This is important. If indeed they did not receive, their malice is made greater, and all the more strongly if they were to aspect from the opposition or square. So if you remember, there was that chart with Venus and Virgo and Mars and Saturn opposing each other, Scorpio and Taurus. Mars was the only planet in that particular condition that was in good condition. The Saturn was not, right? And there's no reception. So Mars could receive that Saturn, or Mars could push his nature on, or push his power onto the Saturn, and it would have, and so that would be not quite as negative. But still be negative enough, right? Because Mars, it was a Mars-Jupiter opposition. Sorry about that. It was a Mars-Jupiter opposition. But remember also Mars and Jupiter are already enemies, right? So a Mars-Jupiter opposition, when Mars and Jupiter are already enemies, that's gonna make problems. If, for example, it were a trine aspect or a sextile, even if without reception, they will impede less. Now, I thought they said something like this. This was not the one that talked about it, but I thought this is where they talked about how if they were in their own signs or exaltations. But generally, the word to use for malefics in their own signs or exaltations is constructive. They tend to be constructive. Not always necessarily good, but constructive. Things can happen.
Like they actually help the native, like they have good intentions.
They make it happen. They can be their best self.
Okay.
Right? If they're in fall or detriment, they can't be their best self. If they're in peregrine, they can't be their best self. If they're in their own domicile or exaltation, they are being their best self. That goes for any planet, but especially the malefics.
Okay.
So 12th consideration, to look at the benefics and see what they would signify, right? So he's doing the same thing here as he did with the malefics. So Jupiter and Venus obviously are temperate, and they imprint with their own temperament. They always strive to help what is their own and not their own with success, whether they receive or not. And the trine aspect of the sextile is better and more useful than the square, and the square is better than the opposition, which we knew. Now, this is interesting, viewing the sun and the things signified by him, because he is said to be a benefic, and that is namely by aspect, by whatever sort of aspect it was, unless it is by the opposition, right? So it looks like then, but what we just learned was that it was the conjunction, the opposition, and the square that were negative, and only the sextile and the trine were positive. But by the corporal conjunction, evil is affected, because then he is said to burn up and make unfortunate every star, unless the star were in Cosmini of the sun, as was said above. Because then it is in the heart of the sun, and every star in the heart of the sun is made strong. Okay, so there's Cosimi. So I guess Cosmimi is the actual term. All right, so that's actually just kind of reiterating most of what we know. But I'm going to include the square. But he's basically saying the conjunction and the opposition of the sun to any planet is malefic. And then 14th consideration is look at Mercury and Moon and to see to which planets are there conjoined because they signify what that one does, or they are of a convertible nature.
We were talking about this. Mercury and Moon are the soul.
That's right. They signify
Yeah.
what that one to which one of them is joined does, right? So that's also the interesting thing. They're saying it signifies what the planet that they're joined to does. So that I don't understand that myself necessarily fully, but
Because I have this in my chart.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, I have a Moon Mercury conjunction. Like the Moon is separating, but it's just 5 minutes, and they're both applying to Mars.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we can definitely see the Mars.
Yeah.
Right, we can definitely feel that. We can definitely. And so I think, so maybe what it's saying is, it's how the Mars then comes out. That's something we'll think about because they signify what that one to which one of them is joined does. They signify what that one to which one of them is joined does. I don't really get that. For they are of a convertible nature. Oh, got it. I got it, what it means. It means that they change into the planet that they're joined to.
Makes sense.
For they are of a convertible. Convertible means to convert. So basically it says that when the Moon and Mercury are conjoined to a planet, they turn into that planet. They become, they end up signifying whatever that planet does.
No surprises there.
So what does your Mars represent? What houses does Mars rule?
Wait, let me just check. I think it's my 5th. And wait. I'll have to just give me a minute. Sorry.
Should be 5th.
Oh wait. No, I erected a new chart, right? Okay, so
Where Scorpio is the 12th house, or is it the 11th?
yeah, Scorpio is the 12th house for me, and Aries is the 4th.
The 4th. Okay, so
Yeah.
family. So something about the Mars Mercury has to do with family.
Okay.
So or with the father specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Mars Mars is contentions, right? So there could be issues. There could have been issues with the father in the past, right? So
yeah, sort of. There have been, yeah, sort of. Not like really bad, but yeah, just ideologically maybe.
I was going to say issues of
Sometimes.
agreement. See, it's Mercury, it's the mind. So they'd be
Yeah.
problems. It would be mental. It would be problems with the way that we think. We think.
Yeah, it's more like a generational gap thing, a very wide generational gap thing. Yeah.
So it'd all be about, like you say, ideology and how we think differently. So that makes
Exactly.
sense. Okay, so that's what I think it's talking about.
Assertiveness versus passiveness.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so there's a passiveness also with the father. Okay. And
Yeah,
Mars is in what sign? Virgo?
Mars is in Sagittarius for me.
Huh, which is not a passive sign at all. Oh, but your Jupiter's in Virgo in retrograde. See, there's the passive. So there's the passive.
I'm the assertive and aggressive one, and he's the more docile and passive, and I'm like, just do it, and just right into things. And he's like, no, let's take things slow, let's be all happy and harmonic and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, call the bullshit what it is.
Right.
So that's where agreement comes from.
Is there a Moon Mars? Is there a Moon Mars application in your chart?
Yeah, there is. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's why. Right. So so that's what's circumventing the Jupiter for you. Because if you didn't have that, then you would be more like him.
Yeah, no doubts there. In the essence I am, but I'm more like I'm not gonna repeat the same mistakes.
Yeah. And also, like you said, you're not passive. So the Moon Mars trine makes the activity, makes let's get it going. Let's action. Let's move. Let's do it.
It's a conjunction. Yeah.
Yeah. It would
It's a
not
conjunction. It's an applying one. So yeah.
Yeah. It would not be a retiring personality, whereas the father probably is more retiring.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we figured that out now. Okay. So 15th consideration is consider the ways in which the planets imprint into inferior things. So basically, remember when they're talking about things like that, they're saying that inferior bodies have their effect on rather superior bodies have their effect on inferior bodies. We are part of the inferior realm. And the heavens are the superior realm. And so the superior bodies are considered the planets, and we're considered the inferior bodies. And so it seems more complex, but as you can see, there's two ways, good and bad. Right? Oh, wait, so how do the planets imprint on inferior things? Oh, they can do it either well or do it on a good way or in a bad way, period. Because the benefics imprint good naturally, the malefics imprint bad naturally, or bring evil naturally, whence you ought always to hope for good when you see the benefics, and fear evil when you see the malefics, unless discussed above decrease, unless the factors discussed above increase it. Planetary significator of some matter is impeded by one of the malefics. We've looked at that before. A planet is not said to be impeded by a malefic unless the malefic projects its rays upon his rays according to the quantity of the orbs of their light. After the malefic projects its light, its rays upon the light, or its rays to the planet, it is said to be an impeded planet until the malefic transits him. What he's basically saying is, if two planets are aspecting each other within the orb of their moieties, he just made that really difficult. And Saul said that after the malefic planet were to here we go. After the malefic planet were to transit the planet whom it was impeding by 1 full degree, the planet is said to be freed from the malefic. But to me, it seems that after the malefic has transited him by 1 minute, the planet may be said to be freed and to have escaped, because the malefic cannot introduce anything after that unless it is fear.
Oh, so he's saying that it's full degree, and he's saying that even if it's 1 minute, it's freed.
That's right. Now, and look, he even gives an example. Moreover, he will introduce greater fear when he has transited him by only 1 minute than when he has transited him by 1 degree. Still, however, the fear which the malefic introduces is such that it does not seem to him that he could escape, nor, however, without a little thread of hope. As an example of this, someone who wanted to go to a battle posed the question whether or not he would return safe and sound from the fight or not. And the ascendant was Gemini, 13 degrees. Mars was in Aquarius at 7 degrees, joined to Saturn at 9. In the 9, joined to Saturn, right, at 7 degrees 53. So Mercury was at 754. Saturn was at 753. Saturn ruled the 8th and the 9th in this chart. And Mercury was separating from Saturn already by 1 minute. Therefore, it seemed he ought to have died in the battle on account of the conjunction with Mercury was making to Saturn in the 8th degree of Aquarius, whence he was in danger of death and feared as though with ultimate fear, and believed he would be killed by his enemies. And he had been pursued by them so that it did not seem he would be able to escape. And often they had their hands on him. Ultimately, however, he escaped from them after practically losing hope because he did not believe he could escape. And this happened to him because of Mercury, who had already been separated from Saturn. And Saul said that if the malefic planet who were impeding some business were cadent from the ascendant so that it does not aspect it, it does not impede, but he will only introduce fear. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is. It's just, wow.
So this is why we study these people. This is why I study Bonatii, I study Valence. These guys were astrologers. These guys were practicing astrologers, looking at charts, taking notice of the same type of shit that we're doing and taking notice of. Right? When we hear an example like this, it makes us say, well, shit, maybe we should be thinking about 1 minute, right?
Yeah.
I know. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, my mind's blown right now.
Yeah, me too. My head's, and they were talking, this is 14th, 13th century, you know,
Exactly.
way, way before. 17, and so this is our last one we'll work with. 17th consideration is to see whether a planetary significator is safe. Now, this is kind of new to me. Indeed, so that it is not impeded by any malefics, and one of the benefics projects its own rays or lights upon his rays or upon his light, because then the planet is said to be safe until the benefic transits by 1 minute. And it's so this is the exact opposite, right? So now the planet's safe until the benefic finishes by 1 minute. After it has transited him by 1 minute, it is not perfected, nor does the matter send anything to him but hope, just as a malefic does not send anything but fear. And hope which the benefic gives is such that the querent believes that the matter will be perfected for him, and it seems to him that it is settled concerning the perfection of the matter, not, however, without the rendering of some kind of doubt. For example, a certain question was posed concerning a certain business deal, whether the matter would be perfected or not. The ascendant was 17 Scorpio, Mars was at 12 Taurus, Venus was in Capricorn at 12 degrees. Yeah, Mars is in 12, 13. Venus was at 12, 14. Capricorn. And truly Venus was joined to Mars by a sextile, by trine aspect, and she was receiving him from her own domicile, right? So Venus was pushing exaltation and then receiving him from her domicile. And Mars was receiving her from his exaltation. And it seemed to the querent and to all those handling the business deal that it ought to have been perfected on account of the aspect of full friendship. And they stood fast in their hope until Venus transited the aspect of Mars by 1 full degree. In the end, however, the matter was destroyed on account of the fact that Venus had already transited Mars by 1 minute by the time the question was made.
Just a freaking minute. Oh my God.
So maybe my bullshit about finishing is just that. Bullshit. Maybe my bullshit about, I mean, this is something to look at. Once again, another one of those things to look at. But 1 minute, that's pretty harsh.
Exactly. It's like, wow.
I mean, you'd think